title booked Navigating My Autism and ADHD Essays, Vignettes, Poems, and Conversation. I am joined by the author himself, Mogamad Salie, who is going to be telling us more about this book in question. Good evening, Assalamu alaikum, and Jazakallah so much for joining us this evening. Mr. Mohammed, are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you.
Alhamdulillah. Jazakallah so much for joining us. Now, just to get inside of navigating my autism and ADHD, can you tell us how did the act of writing this book serve as a therapeutic outlet for you, and in what ways did it help you process your own personal story?
Okay, so I find that when I have a lot of stuff going on in my head because because of the ADHD and all that, there's like all this circulating stuff, and because of autism, I don't connect very well with people. So I needed to get these things out of my head, and the way to do that was I found was to write because that just made it so much simpler.
And with the book really, suggesting the fact that this is quite a journey, how do you define navigating your autism and ADHD, as well as what do you want readers to take away from this exploration?
Okay, so I find I'm neurodivergent, and for me, neurodivergent is a developmental disability. So it's I do not have what they call a learning disability. So that means I can learn lots of things like engineering, maths, all kind of stuff like that. However, I have a developmental disability, which means I have executive functioning issues. I'm not going to go into the whole definition of all those. In case if you want, I can. And sensory processing issues like I have light sensitivity. Um, Sounds, eating, all kinds of stuff which disturbs my whole life. And then I also have the social issues like I do not, you know, like do eye contact. Even here on the video, I noticed now I was looking away the whole time. I don't do eye contact, I don't shake hands, I don't do all the social stuff. So that, and those are not things that I can learn how to do. What is hierarchy in a society? Things like I just don't understand those things. So and then I have with this I have this ADHD thing, which is like attention and focus and stuff like that. So what happens? I'll just blurt out things sometimes, and I'll just talk. And because of social stuff, I do not know what's appropriate sometimes to say because my value system is different. So this developmental disability, it becomes very like troublesome in everyday life and even at work everywhere because as people do notice I can like learn things. I'm actually quite good at learning things. For example, I actually did engineering and it was quite easy. So but this developmental stuff is not possible for me to learn because it's something that I do not have. So and people kind of um I think I'm not so easily accepted. Also, I don't also understand the other people, or the people. So it becomes a complicated battle. So when I wrote the book, I just thought it would be nice for me, basically, was to write out what was going on. And I think if people read through, they might get an understanding what's going on from inside someone like this. And we basically have the same kind of basic needs everybody wants, but we just function a little differently. Yep, I think that answers that question.
And in the spirit of understanding, how does understanding your neurodivergence affect your sense of belonging and your perception of, societal role?
Yeah, as explained earlier, because it's difficult to fit into a society and any group or anything because I don't follow those kind of societal kind of groupings and just follow. For me, things need to make sense and logic, and sometimes just doing something because the group does it or just doing something because to be polite and that it doesn't kind of fit in my brain. So I can learn these kind of things, some of them, but definitely not all of them, and it becomes very tiring and like it's kind of both sides of the party become kind of like irritated when I interact. However, when I'm working, like in my job when I used to do engineering, that was no problem because it's not with human and the cues and all that kind of thing. So yeah, so So in my role, I guess in society, I could do like specialized non-human things quite good, and I think people need that in any place. Like I can do that engineering and build power stations and make a car, whatever, things like that.
Hmm. And with that being said, can you share with us in terms of, for individuals who are still struggling with, finding their way of, best sharing or just articulating how they're feeling and their experiences, what guidance would you give to others struggling to embrace their neurodivergence?
Yeah, like I said, based on this, like this is like the broad idea, the developmental disabilities. I think, like I said earlier, it is possible to learn some of those, for example, social cues. Um, However, it's not possible to implement it properly all the time because there are so many and it's so diverse. For example, like in my community, people shake hands like males, and I just really don't like touching people because I have the sensory processing issues, and kind of overwhelms me certain touches and stuff. So and that thing with my sense I can never unlearn. So to do a social thing, I have to go over something which really troubles me, and it's not always possible because it becomes too much to remember what is correct now. So I would say we should just focus on what's our strengths, because I think I do have some strengths, like I mentioned before. I can do maths and stuff like this, and uh, and it's gonna be in I found in my situation, it's basically impossible to learn all that. So and I'll always make become a problem. For example, when when I learn some social stuff, and when I apply it, I tend to look like a robot. It's like they notice this guy is almost doing it correctly, but not exactly. So it becomes robotic, and people don't like this as well. So I find it just might as well just not anymore try to learn all this social stuff and get my attention going. I mean, I can take medicine to like dopamine to help me focus and stuff, but I think it's not worth the effort because in the end, I'm still not fitting in like everybody else.
Mm. And is there a piece in your book that you find yourself returning to emotionally, perhaps one that resonates most with your journey?
I wouldn't say there's one piece. I think the whole book is about that. So like I say, the way I structured it, I just kind of put it in a structured way so I can figure it out. So like I put it first, I explain like a basic social disconnect, and then later I gave some examples of it in different situations, like in communication, in interaction, in vignettes, and also in conversation. So overall, the whole thing is to me like kind of special, whatever you can say, because I've been writing this since 2001. So it's been long years of journaling that I've just put together now. And but there's one essay that I particularly like. I call it Hope Energy. And I used to think about why do people socialize? I used to think about this for long, and I didn't understand what was the reason behind it and why they do it. So I wrote an article, what I understood, in my logical way, what it is. And if I look, this was written before I found out neurodivergent, so like around 2011 or 2012. So never knew about what I had. And when I look at this essay that I wrote, it's almost as if I'm describing all this, the autistic and neurodivergent qualities. So I find that quite interesting, and I still use that ideas in that article on how to understand what's going on when I'm trying to socialize with people, and to see if it's a positive or a negative socialize activity.
Hmm. Mohammed, with that being said, for someone who would be buying your book and really reading it, and just for those who are just quite interesting, and I think we did show a bit on what the book looked like, navigating my autism and ADHD. Which section do you feel will be quite crucial for educating those less familiar with these conditions? And most importantly, and I humbly request that if you could kindly read for us Grass, the poem titled Grass.
Do you want me to first read the poem or should I first answer that question? Because that's confusing information now.
I
That's
think
again my autistic thing now. I need to have clear, you know, things, otherwise I'm confused.
no, I'm definitely here to also learn how to be, engage better
Yeah.
with neurodivergence in that sense. But I think if we can first off start us by understanding the first part of my question, which is, helping others understand which part of the book that they should really focus on in helping them understand on
Mm.
how to best, exist with individuals who are, of neurodivergence.
I said the first chapter I think gives like basic understanding of how neurodivergent affects me and gives like an internal view of my mind. So I think if people read that first, they will first get a basic under theory of what's going on, and then they see it from inside. And then the next chapters is basically examples of how it was applied in everyday life. So like in vignettes, in my personal vignette is basically like a story that something happened to me that have, and I write it in a way that gives meaning. So some of the vignettes is like my personal life and interaction with my family and stuff. So they can see how a neurodivergent person is interacting with his family, and just my two daughters are also autistic and ADHD, just like me. So two of my daughters, and so and then the next section is conversations and poems. You know, so it's all examples. The poems are basically just things I started writing that was kind of stuff going on in my head. I never knew it was poems until 2 years ago. I went to a poetry reading and I saw that some people read some stuff that looked very much like what I was writing. That's when I decided to put all my writings together. So anyway, let me start with this grass. They asked me to pick one and to put on my glasses. So, okay, it goes like this. Grass have varying greens, starting off bright, eventually they shrivel. Drones, programmed to their limits, perplexed and saturated by variation, aggravated, they populate developed places. An amusing sight with sculptured bodies. Zombies, untrained and infected, scatter, bump, and clutter. Bewildered, they populate undeveloped places. An unsightly sight with neglected bodies.
Wow.
Yeah, so I've read it.
That is so beautiful. If you can just kindly take us through the poem itself, for those who are just struggling to just make sense of like what
Yeah.
is. Yes.
So basically, to start off with, grass is basically to me, I don't know what's the metaphor for humans, or is it, I forget now the English thing exactly, but grass represents humans. That's why from the start, I wrote grass have varying greens. If you look at English grammar, that would be incorrect because grass has varying greens. That would be correct. But because I don't use it as grass, I use it as humans. That's like to that gives the reader an hint to that this is not really about grass. So basically, humans, when they have varying greens, varying colors, and they start off bright, they start off nice, they start off colorful, they're friendly, they look polite and all that. However, eventually they shrivel. For me, in my perspective, humans basically initially they'll say, "Oh, I get along with you. You look so normal. You like I like how you are." But eventually, everybody they all just fade away and disappear, and both people get annoyed. So that's what happens. So that is the first part. Drones. So now I'll go on and explain like the two different like big different types of humans that I've noticed because I lived in a developed country and now I came back to South Africa, which is partly undeveloped. So in this developed country, I noticed that humans, because I'm not connected to them so well, to me they look just like drones. But in the developed country, they're like programmed to their limits, like humans have been educated to their peak ability. However, because of that, sometimes they become overwhelmed and saturated by all this knowledge and stuff. So when the smallest thing falls out of what is okay for them, they can get so aggravated and
Yeah.
confused. However, they populate the developed countries, these programmed humans, and these humans, they also they're amusing because how they can get so like confused by small changes. Like if the train comes too late, 2 minutes too late in a developed country, everybody's in a panic and don't know how to survive that. But so, and also the way I put it, they have sculpted bodies is also indication of that their bodies, everything is so fake in this perfect developed world. Then the next thing I call zombies. Zombies, in my opinion, is what I use the term for developing countries, because in developing countries you have like people that were not educated, they don't have so much money, they don't have access to everything. So the word there is like neglected bodies, means that the government and everybody has neglected them. That's why they are like this. They tend to be untrained, infected. The people are basically a chaos, and they scatter, bump, and clutter, bewildered. They populate undeveloped countries. So it's an unsightly sight with neglected bodies. So also the other thing you can notice in the way it's written, there's this extreme black and white opposites, and this is typical of 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 my autism, like black and white differences. And also you can see the big sensory, the visual, the smells, and the way I try to write like scatter, bump, clutter. It gives you a sound, it gives you sights, gives you vision, because this is how I experience the world, with my sensory stuff. So yeah, that's more or less the idea of that poem.
Mr. Muhammad, Jazakallah so much, for really educating us and giving us a clearer understanding on what it means to be an individual living with autism and ADHD. And I think I'm hoping that through books like that of yours, we get to read and, better ourselves in terms of how we engage with individuals of neurodivergence. But once again, Jazakallah so much for joining us.
Thank you. Shukran.
I mean, viewers at home, that was the author of the book. Previously, also, we spoke about his book, Chicken Legs, A Loner's Way, and also currently tonight, we're talking about his other book titled Navigating My Autism and ADHD Essays, Vignettes, Poems, and Conversations. Mogamad Salie. Make sure you do check out Amazon, as well as his contact details that were supplied through the picture or the image that we just displayed, and get yourself the book and take a read at it, and let's better ourselves in that sense. But for now, let's head over to an break. We'll see you just after this.